Hey everyone, it's Mrs. James, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing in reading. I understand that you guys have been talking a lot about setting and the influence that the setting of a story has on your characters and your plot, really, and other things like that. So, just as a reminder, I wanted to talk about some of the things that you may have been talking about in class. And some of the things that you might want to do, like a little checklist. When you're reading, you want to ask yourself, of course, what kind of place is this? You want to consider the mood of the place, the atmosphere, how people treat each other. You want to notice how the author's specific language evokes emotions and images. You want to ask, is a character torn? Is something in the setting pulling a character between competing pressures? You want to investigate how the psychology of a place shifts and how those shifts affect the characters. You want to consider how group dynamics or powerful individuals may influence a place. And you also want to pay attention to the backstory to gain new insight into characters. Okay? So those are the things you should be kind of thinking about when you're thinking about the setting of a story. And I'm going to extend that today a little bit, and we're going to talk about a fractured fairy tale today. A fractured fairy tale is something that it's a book that is it's similar to a fairy tale that you know and love and you grew up reading probably. The one we're going to talk about today is called Cinder Ellen. Okay, you may or may not have read that story before, but we're going to read it today. It is a take on the original Cinderella, okay? And I want us to really think about how the elements in the story of Cinder Ellen, how they're similar to the original Cinderella story, but also how they're a little bit different. And I really want you to pay attention to the setting of the story today, because the setting really affects the characters. It affects things that happen to the characters. It affects the plot. So as we're reading the story today, I want you to think about some of these things. Okay, so in the original Cinderella, the king is looking for a wife for his son. Okay, the king throws a fancy ball. Cinderella has a fairy godmother who uses her magic wand to help her get ready for the ball. A pumpkin is changed into a carriage. Cinderella leaves behind a glass slipper behind. The Cinderella setting is set in a place a long time ago in a faraway land ruled by a king and a queen. Okay, so that is the original, things that happen in the original Cinderella story that we grew up with. As we read this story today, I want you to be thinking about the elements in the new story, the Cinder Ellen story. Okay, so if you look at the title here, you see that it's called Cinder Ellen, a wild western Cinderella. So right away, in looking at this Cinder Ellen, you can probably tell some things about her. First of all, she's riding horse. She's got a cowboy hat on. She's got like a little bandana, western outfit. So right away, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this doesn't look like the typical Cinderella with her ball gown and her hair done up and her glass slippers. So right away, we can see some contrast to this story. Okay, so as I read the story, I want you to kind of be thinking about those things that we talked about. Okay, here's the picture, and I'm going to read you the story. Even the way that the words are written, the accent that I'll use when I read the story, it all plays into the way that the author wrote this and the way that, it takes on more of a Western flair. So here goes. Once there was a rancher who married for his second wife the orneriest woman west of the Mississippi. She was meaner than a rattlesnake, and she had 2 daughters who were the spitting image of her. The rancher also had a daughter who was just as sweet and gentle as she could be. Her name was Cinder Ellen. Okay, so I'm guessing that this is the rancher, this is his new wife, the two daughters, and then probably Cinder Ellen right there. Ooh. Cindy was a pretty good cowgirl, too. Riding her little gray horse, she wrangled and roped and galloped and loped with the best buckaroos on the range. But as soon as the wedding was over, that snaky old stepmother began to pick on poor Cinder Ellen. She was so good she made her stepsisters look bad. So her stepmother made her do all the dirty work around the ranch. "Mend those fences, tend those cows," she would yell, "and shovel out all the corral." The stepsisters never did a lick of work all day, but Cindy didn't dare complain to her daddy because his new wife wore the pants in the family. When her chores were done, the poor girl used to sit down and rest among the ashes and cinders at the edge of the fireplace. So her older stepsister nicknamed her Cinder Bottom. The younger sister called her Cinderella, but underneath her dirty old clothes, Cinder Ellen was still as pretty as a peach. Then one day, the biggest cattle king for miles, and here he is, miles around, invited all of his neighbors to a 2-day celebration. First, a wild and woolly rodeo, and then a square dancing, a real western fandango. Cindy's stepsisters puffed up like two turkey gobblers. Even though they couldn't ride, they decided to gussy themselves up to fit to kill and enter the rodeo. Nice, patient Cinder Ellen ironed their frilly shirts and frizzied their hair for them. "Don't you wish you could go too, Cinderbottom?" sneered the older sister. "Aw, you're just poking fun at me," said Cindy sadly. "You're right," laughed the younger sister. "Nobody could tell you from a cloud of dust, Cinderella." So they are not very nice. As soon as they were gone, poor Cinder Ellen broke down and cried. And then suddenly she heard a noise outside almost like gunfire, but not quite. It wasn't a bang bang, it was more like a bing bing. And there stood a little old lady with a golden pistol still smoking in her hand. "Well, who are you?" gasped Cinder Ellen. "Say hello to your fairy godmother, Sugarfoot," the old lady said. She twirled that pistol, slapped it back into its holster, and took a hard look at Cindy. "What's the matter with you, honey? You're as down and dirty as a flop-eared hound dog. Stand up straight. Dust yourself off." Let me move that out of the way. Dust yourself off. "I want to go to the rodeo," sobbed Cinder Ellen. "Can you help?" Maybe. See, maybe no," said her fairy godmother. "Magic is plumb worthless without gumption. What you need first, gal, is some gravel in your gizzard, grit and guts. Stop that tomfool blubberin' and let's get busy. Time's a-wastin'." She reached for her golden 6-gun, and Cindy yelled, "Don't shoot!" But her godmother had already fired, straight up into the air. Bing, ping! Glittery sparkles floated down from the sky and sprinkled Cindy all over with fairy dust. Instantly her heart was filled with strength and happiness, and her rags turned into the finest riding clothes west of the east. A creamy white Stetson had crowned her shining hair. So a Stetson is the cowboy hat. Golden buckskin chaps encircled her legs, and a pretty little pair of cowboy boots hugged her feet like gloves. Buckled to the heel of each boot was a spur that shot out rays of fiery light. Those spurs were set with diamonds as big as sugar lumps. "Now," said the fairy godmother briskly, "where's that horse of yours?" She fired her magic pistol into the air, and zing! And Cindy's little gray horse became a little silver horse with a softly sparkling coat. His hoofs glittered as he pawed the ground. "Hit the trail, honey," the old lady said. Remember, there ain't no horse that can't be rode, and there ain't no man that can't be throwed. And one more thing, get home by midnight, gal, or you'll be sorry. Okay, so right away we're probably noticing that instead of a ball gown, she has been all spiffed up into her white Stetson hat and the chaps and her nice boots here. It's very different than the ball gown. Okay, when Cinder Ellen pulled up at the rodeo, everybody turned and stared at the dazzling stranger on the silver horse. The rich rancher's son, a rodeo champion by the name of Joe Prince, came forward wearing the biggest belt buckle you ever did see, and swept his hat off of his head. "I'm pleased to meet you, ma'am," he said. "Likewise," said Cindy. And here's all the people looking at her as she comes into the rodeo. Just then, Cindy's older stepsister rode a bucking bronco into the arena, and before she could say oopsie daisy, that cayuse wrinkled his spine, boiled over, and sent her chasing clouds way up in the sky. Then she bit the dust. Next came the second stepsister, but she couldn't ride a tail fence in a stiff breeze, and pretty soon she was eating gravel just like her sister. Cinder Ellen helped her stepsisters up and brushed them off, but they never even recognized her. Then she remembered. So here's the second stepsister. She fell right in the dirt as well. Let's see. Cinder Ellen helped her stepsisters up and brushed them off, but they never even recognized her. Then she remembered her godmother's gift of gumption, and she gave Joe Prince a big daredevil grin. "It's my turn," said Cinder Ellen. Cinder Ellen climbed aboard a salty bronc with a belly full of bed springs and a real rip snorter. She touched him with her diamond spurs, and first he tried to crow hop, and then he cat-backed, and then he sunfished, and then he windmilled, and then jackknifed, but Cindy stuck to the saddle like a postage stamp. "Ride 'em, cowgirl!" cried the crowd, and Cinder Ellen was the winner, with every curl in place. Next, with the figure 8, a butterfly, and a wedding ring, she won the trick roping event. And then she and her horse really burned the breeze. They kicked the jackrabbits right off the trail. Then they left their shadows 20 miles behind them, and they won the horse race. They even beat Joe Prince. But Joe didn't seem to care. He rode herd on Cinder Ellen right up to a 11:15 at night, when she suddenly recalled her godmother's warning and went galloping home. By the time she got there, her fine duds had shriveled into sorry rags again, but she still had plenty of gumption. After a while, her stepsisters hobbled in, all stove up from the rodeo. "Ha ha! You missed the champion cowgirl," the older sister jeered. "Nobody even knows her name, or where she disappeared to. And that old Joe Prince is eating his heart out," said the younger one. "I bet she comes to the square dance tomorrow night," said Cindy with her new daredevil grin. The next evening, her stepsisters got all dressed up like a sore thumb and strutted away to the dance, leaving Cinder Ellen all alone. But not for long. "What is that?" she said, peeking out the window. It looked like a cross between a comet and a dust storm, and it sounded like silver bells mixed with dynamite. "Let's get crackin', Sweet Pea," shouted her fairy godmother. "You're late. Rustle me up the biggest, dustiest, lumpiest squash you can find, and zingo!" The squash became a stagecoach. "Next we check the trap line," said her godmother, and quick as a wink she turned 6 cactus mice into the 6 dappled horses, a fat pack rat into a stagecoach driver, and a rough and tough horned toad into a stagecoach guard, riding shotgun beside the driver. So here's all the dappled horses. The dappled horses just mean the coloring of the horses there. There you have the driver. There you have Cinder Ellen with the godmother. Notice the godmother is also a little old lady rancher herself. And there she is. It says, "But what about my ugly old clothes?" asked Cindy. The old lady answered with a blast of fairy dust and melted into a dress that shone like the sun, the moon, and the stars all together. The skirt floated over, and here she is. The skirt floated over petticoats as soft and puffy as summer clouds. So a petticoat is that little slip-like thing that you would wear under your dress that makes it all puffy. We don't really wear those anymore, but that's what they used to wear. The petticoat made it as soft and puffy as summer clouds. A rainbow of jewels glowed around Cinder Ellen's neck, and the little diamond spurs sparkled once more upon her boot heels. "Thank you, ma'am," she cried. The fairy godmother blew the smoke from her pistol, holstered it, and dusted off her hands. "Remember, Miss Cindy, pretty is as pretty does," she said. "Magic can backfire, midnight or bust." Cindy promised, and the stagecoach rumbled away. When Cinder Ellen arrived at the Cattle King's square dance, the fiddlers were tuning up for a toe-tapping jamboree. Joe Prince reached for Cindy's hand, and the instant he laid eyes on her, "Buckle on your partners, folks," he called, "and tell 'em to hang on. Let's shake our hooves like lightning until the early dawn." And Cindy answered, "Hurry up, cowboy, don't be slow, all a maid left and do-si-do." Hand over hand and heel over heel, Joe and Cindy danced the daisy chain. And here they are. Danced the daisy chain, the whirl-away, the curly-cue, and the grand sachet. They made their feet go wickety-whack. "Swing 'em, boys," cried Cindy, "and do it right." And Joe called back, "Swing those girls to the middle of the night." Twirling, swirling, Cinder Ellen lost track of time until all at once she heard the clock strike 12. She hightailed it out of there, lickety-split. "Whoa!" yelled Joe, hot on her heels, but he couldn't catch her, and one of the diamond spurs fell off Cindy's boot as she ran, though, and Joe picked it up carefully out of the dust. So there she is running off, and here is Joe looking at the spur that fell off. So that's very similar to the glass slipper falling off. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, not a particle remained of Cindy's gorgeous outfit, except for the second diamond spur, which she tucked away in her hip pocket. Pretty soon word got out that the champion cowgirl was a wanted woman. She'd left Joe Prince so lovelorn that he was tracking her throughout the territory, and he vowed to marry the horsewoman whose boot fitted the little diamond spur. He tried it on many a foot, but not one could wear it. So here's all the ladies lined up to try it on, but not one of them could wear it. At last he came up to Cindy's father's place. "Go shovel out the stable," hissed the stepmother, and Cindy reluctantly obeyed. First, Joe tried the diamond spur on the younger stepsister, but no matter how he stretched the straps, her hoof was too big. The older sister had crushed her feet into the tiny little boots, so just for an instant the spur almost fit. But then her boot split open, and her toes popped out like puppies from a basket, and Joe Prince muttered, sorry, and he headed for the door. Yuck. So there's the stepmother telling Cindy she cannot stay in. She needed to go shovel the stable. "It's my turn," said a voice that stopped him in his tracks. It was Cinder Ellen, and although her mean stepsisters almost died laughing, Joe let Cindy have her chance, fair and square, and when he put the diamond spur around her dirty little boot, it fit perfectly. Then she pulled out the second diamond spur and buckled it onto her other boot, and at that very moment Cindy's little horse gave a whinny, And everyone heard a noise like, and here they are trying on the boot. Aw. Wingo, wango, kazing! Let her rip! Shouted Cindy Ellen's fairy grandmother, brandishing her golden pistol. Hold your fire! Yelled Joe Prince. But glistening sparks of fairy dust were already sparkling down everywhere. They turned Cindy's clothes from cotton to satin, and they put quite a twinkle in Joe's eye, and Cindy's horse began to sparkle. Yee-haw! Yelled the fairy godmother. So here is Cindy Ellen. Here's Joe, the fairy godmother. So Cindy Ellen and Joe Prince got hitched and lived happily ever after in the ranch house full of love and rodeo trophies. Cindy's family moved to town where both stepsisters married city slickers, and Cindy's little horse kept his sparkling coat and his glittering hoofs to the end of his days. Here they are. This is just hitched, which means just married. And they're riding off into the sunset in their little wagon. So there you go. So that's just a little Western version of the Western Cinderella. And so now I want you guys to listen to Mrs. Newberry or to get instructions from her. I'm sure you're going to be filling this out. Hopefully you enjoyed the story today. Thanks for letting me read it to you. I really enjoy getting to do these kinds of things. So I hope y'all do great, and I will see you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.